Amanda, and this is Not Your Granny's Quilt Show. Welcome to today's episode. I have Belle of Seams Sew Me. She is a pattern writer. She is an educator. She's a coach for guilds and quilty businesses all over the place. So if you have not heard of Belle, you're probably under a rock. Anyway, she's here to talk to us about all things quilty and what she does for quilters and quilt businesses alike. So let's jump in. Hey, have you been to Patreon today? If you head to patreon.com/notyourgranny's quilt show and become a patron, you get a Not Your Granny's Quilt Show logo sticker sent right to your door. That's Not Your Granny's Quilt Show Patreon at patreon.com/notyourgranny's quilt show. Are you out there representing your support for Not Your Granny's Quilt Show? Well, you could be if you had some merch. If you head to the merch shop, you can find sweatshirts, t-shirts, tote bags, mugs, all sorts of accoutrements, also stickers, and you can get the word out there that you love and support the show. So head to nygqs.printify, printify.me today to hit the pop-up shop and grab some merch. Hello, my quilty darlings. Thank you so much for being here. If you have not already, if you could pop over to Apple Podcasts and leave a 5-star review, that would be fantastic. As soon as we hit 50 5-star reviews, I will be doing a huge giveaway. So please stay tuned and get yourself over there to leave a 5-star review today. Thank you. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Belle. How are you?
I'm great. And how are you today?
I'm pretty good.
Well, I'm trying to get acclimated as well. I just finished a big move to Arkansas from Missouri. And so, really, this is my first week kind of back to work. So,
Oh, wow.
yeah.
Yeah, that is a big move. And what took you to Arkansas?
Well, I'm originally from here, as you can probably tell by my accent. Yeah, lived away from this county for 30 years. So, I left when I was 18, went off to college, and then moved out of Arkansas at 20. And so my father still lives here. He lives on the property that I grew up on, and he's built an Airbnb, and he's getting,
Oh,
older. And so it was just time to come back home and
yeah.
help with that. That Airbnb will also be a quilting retreat in the spring, a small one. So it'll be good to be here to help with that. And
Yeah.
the cost of living is cheaper.
Mhm.
So it was just time to be back out of the city where it's very rural here. You can't really see your neighbors.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it was a big move. It was 3 weeks of unpacking. I flew another quilt pattern designer in from Canada, and she spent 4 full 8 to 10 hour days with me getting all of the studio unpacked and set up, or it would
Yeah.
not be done.
Yeah. I saw that it was Maud, right? You brought
Yeah, it
Maud.
was
Oh,
Mama, the retro quilter. Yeah,
I
we're
love her.
kind of quilty BFFs since,
Oh,
well, gosh, it's been a little over 2 years now.
wow. That's amazing. Well, and so lovely of her to come there and help you. And it is such a big endeavor. And especially when you've got, a quilt studio is something so different than just moving a bedroom or moving an office. It's like everything, your machines and all your tools and everything has to be treated with such care. So that's like a big,
Yeah, and she's really good at it. I mean, she's got a small space, so I went from an extra bedroom to this is a 700 square foot separate building that is on the property that used to be an old RV garage. And so
oh,
my father converted it into a sewing quilting studio slash office because I have another business too, and I do a lot of computer work on Zoom and
mhm,
trainings on Zoom. So that's what this used to be. And Maud she's just good with color and organization and all of that. And I had just unpacked the house and done
mhm.
all of that. And I just knew I was going to need help because I have some deadlines with both businesses coming up. So I took all of September off to really
Okay.
pretty much get acclimated for the most part. There's a few, like I said, did a couple trainings this week, and the next week I have a couple, but it's
Mhm.
full force again. October 1 through the end of November, there's quite a bit of travel and training.
Okay. So yeah, you kind of have to like reset after something like that too, because it's I mean, you just moved your whole life somewhere else and just readjusting to how things are now and making new
Yeah.
routines and
It's true. It's
so
fun. I like
yeah.
change. Change is exciting and fun, but I also am older. I'm 48 now, and I've
Mhm.
moved, oh goodness, since I was 18, I've probably moved 20 times, just
Oh,
sometimes
wow.
in the same town. But
Mhm.
I love new experiences, and the older I get, the more difficult it is to
Mhm.
move. Yeah. So this should be the last one.
Hopefully, right? We'll cross our
Yeah.
fingers, but
Yes.
well, that's fun that you guys are starting an Airbnb and I we have one too and it's honestly so fun. It's great to be able to share space with people and give them like a cozy spot to do their vacation and then
Hmm.
run amok. But
Well, and it's so much more affordable too than
mhm,
hotels. Plus, you've got usually an area to cook and just more space. And so, yeah, it
yeah,
works out well.
yeah,
We
yeah,
decorated the one that Dad has built. I've got
yeah.
quilty things in there and my
Oh,
business
good.
cards. Yeah,
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's kind of fun to share that with people and share what you do with people because it's just they're like they can't help but ask about the quilts because for a lot of them it's the first time they're seeing something modern. So,
that's true. Well, and just to bring new people in the fold,
mhm,
because, a lot of people, I mean, I started 3 years ago at 45.
mhm,
And so, people can start at any age, but if they're not exposed to it in kind of the cool way,
mhm,
it's a fun modern, even though our blocks may necessarily not always be modern quilting,
right.
people think that it's an old person's hobby when we
Mhm,
know, it's what is it, a $5 billion industry that so many of us younger ones are doing. So we want to
mhm.
bring new people in and share that
Yeah,
legacy.
yep, exactly. And it doesn't have to be generational. I know for so many people it is. It's like, oh, my grandma did, and then my mom, and then
Mhm.
me. And but, for me, that's not the case. Like my mom's grandma taught her to sew, but she wasn't necessarily a quilter. And my mom wasn't a quilter until a couple years before me,
Mm.
which was, I've only been quilting for 6 years. So it's like, it's not necessarily like my mom has sewn her whole life, but quilting has been a relatively new kind of endeavor. But now we're like teaching my younger sister and my niece who's
Yeah.
10, she's like getting really interested in it. So it's like now we're kind of getting into that kind of generational passing down of quilting versus just sewing as a skill.
Well, and there's so much to it. It's therapeutic.
Mhm,
It's recreational. It's a great thing for kids to get into. It's
mhm.
not a bad habit or, you know, s- watching movies all the time. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
and you give, there's gifts that you give from it. There's just all around. It's just such a positive craft,
Mhm,
whether it's a hobby or it's a business.
mhm.
I say quilting changes the world sometimes. And what I mean by that is that it can change the maker and also the receiver. So
Mhm.
we learn so much. The dopamine release that happens therapeutically just as we make things and feel that joy, but then also the joy of giving and seeing how people feel when they receive a quilt. If they're
Yeah.
going through a terminal illness or a divorce or they're sick, and to see someone truly touched by a quilt, knowing what goes into it,
Mhm.
to me brings a lot of joy. So I
Yep.
think it makes people better.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think as a because my business outside of the podcast is making quilts for people and long arming, and so getting to have a hand in some of that
Mhm.
and making people's dreams come to life or putting a really great pantograph on someone's quilt and giving it a personality and watching their eyes light up when they see their quilt almost finished and just ready to be loved is
Mhm.
there's just something about it. And we make a lot of memory quilts, which when we started our Etsy shop for it and started making custom quilts for people, we didn't really realize how many requests we would get for memory or t-shirt quilts. And
Mhm.
I know a lot of people are like, "Oh, I won't make t-shirt quilts." But like we've made so many, like we're really good at it. But
Good for you.
but being able to give people that tangible memory so they don't have to keep their loved ones' things in a box and tucked away, and they can keep it out or keep it in a place where they can have access to it and snuggle with it and, make something meaningful for them in the moment of loss or even after the loss happens, years after. It's like we're still bringing that person comfort in a time when they need that, and that is priceless.
It really is, and it's interesting you bring this up. I am a planner
Mm,
by nature, and so let me tell you what I did. You probably can't see it, but in the back corner there is, let's see if I can get it right there. There is a tall, like it looks like a laundry basket.
mhm.
And in there are all of my husband's old t-shirts. So I have saved all of them in case something ever happened to him. These
Yeah.
are ones that he doesn't wear now that he used to wear that like don't fit, but they're like, they're not all stained up, all the different
Mhm.
colors from when we were dating.
Mm.
And I've saved all of them if in case something ever happened to him. Like I'm
Yeah.
prepared to I've never made a t-shirt quilt,
Yeah.
but it's like I know myself well enough that I know I would need that to snuggle with because he
Mhm.
wouldn't be here anymore. And I know that must sound crazy because he's like,
No.
you're such the biggest catastrophizer. Like nothing's gonna happen to me. I'm like,
You can't say that for
someday,
sure. Yeah.
yeah, so I'm prepared. Now I've got to
Yeah.
do all the research on how to actually do it because I know there is an art to it, but I've got his shirts just in case.
That's good. Well, at least you've started. I think
Yeah.
yeah, it can get overwhelming, I think, for people, but just being a spot where they can send their things and know that they're gonna get something
Hmm.
from it, and it's not gonna just take up space in a box, but it's gonna be
Right.
something that can
Used.
be used and loved and, maybe be passed down to
Hmm.
children or grandchildren or something. Like, we just get a lot of requests, and it's just like heartbreaking, but also brings us so much joy to be able to do that for people and
Hmm.
have the skills to do it for people. Because I think sometimes, we've gotten things that's like, well, I started, but I realized how much work it was, so I'm willing to pay somebody else to do it. It's like, okay, we got you.
Right. We'll take care of you.
Yeah. So anyway, but so you have a lot of titles under your belt in the
Mm,
quiltiverse. So you said you started at 45. So what got you into quilting, and yeah, how did you evolve into where
sure.
you're at now?
Well, I never knew how to quilt before 45. I was a social worker in my 20s and then was the executive director of a couple of nonprofits
Mm,
in my 30s. And I always worked in the field of the nonprofit field and then also specialized in working in the field with child abuse
mm,
organizations because I
okay.
got out of the direct line work. And I never really had a hobby during all of that. My life was really more about work and helping kids and all of that. And then that got to be a bit much. And so I got into the training aspect. So I was a regional trainer for 7 years, traveling and working with boards of directors of nonprofits, working still working some with child abuse organizations, multidisciplinary teams,
Mhm,
doing team trainings, leadership trainings, all of that kind of stuff.
mhm,
And when the pandemic hit, everything went to virtual. So I used Zoom some anyway, but when the pandemic hit, we were grounded. There was no flying, no
yeah,
traveling, any of that. So I was on Zoom 8 hours a day.
mhm,
And it was a lot. I had to get a standing desk, because I
mhm,
couldn't set that much. And I was like, I'm gonna lose my mind. I need to come up with a hobby.
yeah,
And I had taught my little stepdaughter, let's see, she was probably about 5 or 6, how to hand sew.
okay,
And she would make little pillows for her little lovey and things
mhm,
for her dolls and all of that. And during that time, um, she was really catching on to and enjoying sewing. And we had bought her a little kid sewing machine, and
mhm,
she kind of graduated from that and was ready for a big girl sewing machine. So
yeah,
we found one on Facebook Market, met, the person in the parking lot kind of thing because couldn't really go in people's houses.
yeah,
And I bought this vintage 1967 Janome New Home sewing machine. It was in mint condition. And
whoa,
I didn't know it was worth about $550, but we got it for 75 bucks.
What? Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Beautiful. This beautiful mint green color.
Mhm.
So we bought it, but before we bought it, we told her, now if we buy you a good sewing machine, we're gonna have to, I'm gonna have to spend time. We're gonna spend time together, go through the manual and show you how to use it properly. So she
Yeah.
agreed.
Mhm.
When we got the sewing machine, she didn't want to do that. She
Oh,
just didn't want to learn how to use it. So I was like, okay, you're not ready yet. We're just going to keep it here in my office, and you let me know when you're ready to learn how to properly use it, and I'll show you. Because
yeah.
we're not going to break this machine now that we know how much it's worth, and
Right.
no, sew over her finger or whatever.
Mhm.
So it was in my office during this time. And I was like, maybe I'll learn to sew something. And I was like, well, what am I going to learn to sew? I wasn't really interested in sewing garments, although my
Mhm.
mother she sewed her own beautiful business suits and
Oh,
dresses
wow.
and all of that, but she never taught me. I just remember
Yeah.
seeing the machine and the notions in her pretty, clothes. And she sewed
Mhm.
me a few things as well. So I thought, well, maybe I'll make a quilt. One of my grandmothers quilted, but she never showed me. When I would go visit her in the summer, she would put that stuff up. So
Oh.
I would see the paraphernalia, right? The
Right.
buttons. Like I've got her button tins back there, and I would play
Yeah.
in the buttons and
Mhm.
see the quilt loom on the quilt hoop on the back porch, and it was a covered back porch, but I never knew how to do it.
Yeah.
So anyway, I thought, well, I'll learn to make a quilt. So I got on YouTube, and that's where I learned. I just watched
Wow.
video after video, and used that new to us
Yeah.
machine to make my first quilt. And I was like, this is amazing. Like, why didn't I learn how to do this sooner? Like, I've
Right.
wasted all of these years. Here I am, 45, and I could have been doing this, right, for a long
Right.
time. And I just fell in love with it. So I started making them, one for dad. I made one for, my Jasmine, my stepdaughter. I made
Mhm.
some for friends, and then I would make little quilty things, right?
Yeah.
Backpacks and uh, table runners and all of that.
Yeah.
And so that's where it all started. And I opened a little Etsy shop to sell notions. So I was designing and making my own notions because one of my slogans is make lovely things, because
Mhm.
I love pretty lovely things to use when I quilt and sew. I
Yeah.
just do. And so I couldn't find straight pins, quilting pins that were pretty, that
Yeah.
weren't just plain.
Mhm.
So I came up with this design and was making my own, and I started selling them on Etsy, and it got to be where I made enough just to kind of cover my fabric, which was
Yeah.
good. And then I made alphabet clips because there was nothing out there to label my fabric pieces
Mhm.
except post-it notes, and you pin them.
Yeah.
And then the alphabety things fall off the stack. So I didn't
Mhm.
like those. So anyway, I went through a prototype and what have you. And so I sell number and alphabet clips, and I'm getting ready to go ahead and have those manufactured because I just don't have the time to make the quantity of what's needed,
Yeah.
what people are wanting. So I don't sell the pens anymore. They
Mhm.
take too long to make, but the alphabet clips were such a need and still are in the industry that
Yeah.
I do make and publish those. So that is where the actual business started. And then
Okay.
that led into, I wonder if I can design my own patterns, and taking a course and all of
Mhm.
that. And then, now here we are today.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. And I think it's kind of hard to find like because there are so many notions and tools out there, but to find something that you absolutely love, that
Mm.
looks nice, that works well is like, I mean, honestly, finding a needle in a haystack sometimes. It's
Mm-hmm.
like I can't tell you how many rulers I've tried or how many different rotary cutters I've tried or how many different, just little
Mm-hmm.
things that's and some pens it's like, oh, these are cute, but they're too thick, or these are cute, but they're too thin. And these are, it's like
Right.
it's so hard to find those things. So it's kind of, I mean, to me, it's brave that you were just like, I'm gonna make my own and
Yeah. I
hopefully
was
other
like,
people
yeah.
like it too.
Yeah, they did. Right now I was sold out. I've been sold out for 4 weeks or so,
Oh, wow.
during the move. And I've just made another huge batch, which
Mhm.
I they'll go live today or being listed today. And people are waiting. They're like, just subscribe to my newsletter. And when they come back out, I'll let you know with the letter. So
Mm.
they're that popular.
Wow.
But, I only sell things I love and I use. Like if, I'm an ambassador for, um, you know, with some different things like the Oliso iron. I work with
Hmm.
Oliso and things like that. And I'm going to be an Arrow sewing ambassador, and they have
Oh,
sewing tables, and that'll be
yeah.
official October 1. And so there's things that if I love it and use it, then I'll share it. But if I
Yeah.
don't, I'm not going to, right?
Yeah.
Because, it's credibility, and you got to be excited and really love something. So those notions, especially
Yeah.
the alphabet clips,
Yeah.
I love them. I use them and I take them when I teach at quilt shows and guilds, and people are like, "What is this?" And then,
Mhm.
so it's
Yeah.
handy.
Yeah. And it's so smart because you're right. It's like, and sometimes like you can get pins that on the heads, they have the numbers, but if they only go to 10, it's like, what if my quilt has more rows than that? And that's not including, yeah, all the pieces that you have to cut and the
Mhm.
labeling you have to do of the colors and the prints and the different, pieces that you're cutting
Mhm.
to turn into the blocks. It's like there's so many more steps in the process that require more than just numbered pinheads.
Yeah, they do. And these are made out of antique brass. They're a real sturdy jumbo clip, so
Okay.
they don't break.
Hmm.
And then they have with a die cut wood, the actual letter and number. And so they're real sturdy and they'll hold a big stack. So
Yeah.
it is an investment. They're not like cheap plastic or,
Right.
pins that are going to bend. So there's something that, that'll last you. They're not going to break. So they're going to
Yeah.
last for a long time.
Yeah. Which is
So,
great because I think there can be so much waste in
yeah.
the quilty
Hmm.
world of, fabric and
Yeah.
notions and all the things. So,
Well, and I'm in the middle of researching to get them manufactured because,
mm,
I mentioned I have another business. I'm a trainer and consultant. So I ended up leaving the organization I was working for and
mhm,
opening my own business, doing the same work so I could do quilty things half time
yeah.
and this other business half time. And, to make a living, you can't just do one thing, at least at this part of my career. So I
Yeah.
need both businesses. And so I don't have time to make them at the level that I really need to with, some of the distributors are interested in them and all that. So it's
Yeah.
kind of a process to learn,
Yeah.
how to have things manufactured and all.
Yeah. I'm sure because it's like if it's not like the thing you do, it's probably like, where do I even start? You
Yeah.
know?
Well, yeah, my husband has some experience with it because he
Oh,
does have some things manufactured for his business. So he's been helpful in pointing me
oh,
in the
good.
right direction. So anyway, more to
Yeah.
come. But until then, you kind of have to wait till I put them out there and
Yeah.
then snatch them up, and they're usually sold out within about 48 hours.
Oh my Lanta. That's a lot.
I know.
But that's so cool that the demand is still there because then it just over time has let you know, like, no, this is something people want. And it wasn't just like a
Yeah.
one time, one sellout, then it's like nobody wanted them again. I mean,
Hmm.
now I'm like, well, can you make more? Because I'm gonna need some now. Like,
Well, yeah, you can get on my website today and you'll be able to snag you a set. But
yeah.
yeah, no, it is, and they'll send me messages. I love these, or they'll tag me in
Hmm.
photos of them, and
Yeah.
it feels good when it's something that it was a need. It
Yeah.
it filled a need. It fills a need for people, right? It's not just something frivolous.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I mean, yeah, and it's one of those things. It's like I'm a maker. I could make it myself, but it's like when someone else is already doing it and doing it well, then support that person and save yourself time. It's like
Yeah,
it's one
yeah.
of those things where you have to decide what your priority is in that moment.
Hmm.
And
It's true.
I'm a
It's
big
true.
fan of supporting small businesses and supporting,
Same. Yeah.
makers. And if it is something I could make myself, but someone else is doing it, then I'm almost always gonna go support a small business to get
Well,
the
that's
thing
great.
that's already made because I just I already can't even have the time to make the stuff I want to make for myself, let alone,
Right. Well, and you kind of have to pick your battles. You ask what hats and what roles that I wear. Well, I have
Mhm.
two businesses. I'm a stepmom and a
Yeah.
wife. And then we've got, the Airbnb that we're helping run with my dad. And then, we now live on 3 acres. So there's mowing and there's weeding and there's, all
Mhm.
of those things. So you just
Yeah.
kind of have to pick you just kind of have to prioritize and pick, what you can focus on. I can't do all of the things that I would love to do. I think in this business, if I could do this full time, which eventually I hope to do that,
Yeah.
then I'll be able to do some more things that I'd like to do.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's when you're the, you know, star of the show
Mm,
and running the behind the scenes and all the other things, it's like you do have to pick your battles and you do have to balance what you choose to put your energy toward because it's like as much as I want to just sew my own things all the time and like, make Instagram reels, it's like I realistically don't have that time. It's like my business, doing the work for that is more important and like niching in, I think is where
mhm.
like that's where I think people find more success is when and not just because that's when I got more successful as a business, but like just niching in and doing what you do well and focus on that and not try to have so many pokers in the fire because I think sometimes we can overwhelm ourselves as entrepreneurs and be like, "Oh, and I can do
Yeah.
that, and I can do that, and I can do that." And it's like, "Okay, but what's realistic and what is worthwhile to you and what can help you uphold your values as a person as well as a business owner?" And
Well, and I think that's I have kind of an interesting perspective on that um, from my own experiences that I think there is a period of time that you kind of have to try a lot of things to
yeah,
know what you love. And
right.
I'm still kind of in that. Like I'm
Mhm,
heading slowly out of the funnel to niching down, but you
mhm.
know, just to do only one thing, I'll never be that. And
Right,
that's just not that's not for me. Some people only do one thing,
right.
like really, and it's just that doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
But I will say I've tried a lot of different things. And so with time, I'm learning, okay, I don't love this, or there's not
Mhm.
enough ROI on this, or this doesn't bring me joy, or this doesn't match with, I have two main values I function off of. And so it takes time, I think, to really niche down. I think it
Yep.
can take, a number of years. I'm on year 3
Yeah.
and feel like I'm getting more clarity.
Mhm.
And you also have to see what resonates for people.
Yeah.
Sometimes what resonates for you may not sell.
Right. Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I think it takes some time to kind of figure that out with the
Absolutely.
whole niching. And then how
Yeah.
far down do you go? And that's up to you.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I'm with you. And I think, we didn't start really niching in until I think it was right around year 3. It was when I joined full time. I had quit teaching and then that's when I was kind of able to give the full support that we needed to do the things that we're doing now, which is, yeah, making the custom quilts and,
Mm-hmm.
offering embroidery for labels and as quilt elements. And, you know, we thought for sure, like, which we still are going to, but we sell Shannon Minky
Mm-hmm.
on our Etsy site as well, and we love to use it on, you know, quilt backs, and so it was something that we were willing to invest in because we love it so much and we swear by it. So, but that hasn't been the big seller as much as the custom quilts. And so
Yeah.
it was just on a whim, I was like, "I think I can make a listing to make this a thing," and my mom was like, "Okay, let's try it," and it was just, like, out of the gates immediately so popular,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah, you have
it
to take
kinda
risks. You
yeah,
have to take risks.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and it kinda niched itself for us, like, we didn't really have to try too many things, which we're not
Mm-hmm.
against, like, obviously evolving and trying new things and finding a new path forward if we have to, but it was just crazy and yeah, I think you're right, like, giving things time and figuring out if you even like it still or if it is resonating with your client base or people that find you, and I think
Yeah, I know for me, I'm extroverted by nature, and so I like to be with people. So that's why I enjoy teaching in
mhm,
person. However, I will say, another facet of Seam Sew Me, my business is I also do training and consulting for Quilt Guild boards of directors.
Okay.
And so I'm learning too that there's a need for some of the work that I do to be available as like little mini workshops virtually because it's more affordable
Mhm.
for them because they have to pay my travel,
Yeah.
to come in and all of that. So I'm working on some modules to
Mm.
where, they can have board orientation of roles and responsibilities and, things like that. And then some of them I do virtual training with because it can be done here on Zoom
Right.
with the boards and they don't have to pay my travel. So, even though I love the in person, that's what
Mhm.
I prefer, you know,
Yeah.
economically for them. And then, time wise, it is easier for me to do this stuff here than to
Yeah.
drive an hour and a half to the airport, fly, all of that. So,
Mhm.
with the niching down, it's tough because some things take more time physically for me to go somewhere.
Yeah.
Um, and
Yeah.
but it's just a balance you kind of have to figure out
Yeah.
as you go.
Yeah, absolutely. And in someone's niche, like you said, it can look like one thing or, for a person like you, it's like a lot of things and that's great and a lot of modalities for people to access what you have to offer and but you're doing what you do really well and offering it to people in different ways and I think that is niching, it's like whatever that means for you and your business, it's like it looks different for everybody and I
Hmm.
think when you find that you can tell. It's like all of your things align. Your life will align, your business will align. It's like everything just kind of comes together and it looks different for everybody and I think
Yeah.
that's important to recognize too because you're right, it's not the same. Some things do take time. Some things do
Hmm.
take trying a million different things and just the openness to be willing to go through that experience is the most important piece of it, I think, of if
Hmm.
you're really loving this and really committed to it, then you might have to put in a little extra work sometimes and to find those things that do resonate and ring out into the quilty world and bring more people in. And so I love to see it when it's happening because it's like it feels so good and so meaningful and like, yes, someone else found their stride in all this, and it's
Yeah,
just, like,
and
so fun and encouraging.
it is. And I've learned too, sometimes I've been on a few podcasts and I think one of the questions that came up one time was, do you deal with imposter syndrome or
Mm.
comparison and all of that? And I think that that's what holds people back is if you compare yourself with others. I don't. I mean, I tend to look when I look at others and what they're doing, I either view it as an inspiration of, I wonder if that would work. I wonder what that would be like.
Yeah.
But not in the sense where it paralyzes you, right? So,
Mhm.
or you feel jealousy or envy or all of those feels that are not good for us inside.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important to remember to I have this phrase, take what works and leave the rest. So take what works for you, what others do that you may want to try,
Yeah.
with how they run their business or
Mhm.
techniques or things like that. But
Yeah.
don't try to do it all. I mean, you want to sample it, but don't try to be someone else. Be your own authentic self and own that. And that can take a
Mhm.
little bit of time, I think, to figure out.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, but
Yeah.
just, being your own person and not feeling like you have to do exactly what other people are doing because maybe they're having success. Um, you know,
Yeah.
kind of figure out your own way and see what works for you.
Yeah. And I do like, it was worse in the teaching world, but I definitely do still kinda struggle with imposter syndrome sometimes, and
Do you?
yeah, and, so it can be tricky, but I also, like, have such a great support system too, like, my
Good.
husband is, like, always 100% in my corner, and, I we run the business with my parents, and usually they're pretty amenable to things I wanna try try because 'cause I'm usually the one that's
Yeah.
pushing, like, "We need to try this new thing," and but it does sometimes hold me back, especially, like, I think starting this podcast was, um,
Brave.
so
Was very
scary.
brave.
Oh, thanks.
Brave. You were brave. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's, like, pushing me to challenge those
Mhm.
intrusive thoughts of, like, it's like I go back and forth with people, like, I shouldn't ask them, they'll never say yes, like, why would they talk to me? Versus
Mhm.
when I am feeling in my confident self and stepping into that and being like,
Mhm.
"No, because it's fun, I'm a fun person," like,
You are.
you know? But
Yeah.
not to, like, toot my own horn because that's weird, but
Well, let me ask you, so, this is called Not Your Granny's Quilt Show.
yeah.
Where'd you come up with that? And like in your mind, what is it you wanted to get out into the world with the theme of the podcast?
Yeah. So my friend who started the podcast with me, she and I kind of came up with it as a way to um not a way to say like make a statement, but just kind of be relatable to people that were in our position, other millennial quilters who
Mhm.
were wanting to quilt in the modern world, and maybe we didn't have some great experiences with some of the quilters in the older generation who really think
Mm.
their mindset is stuck in a certain way. So it's not necessarily that you have to be a granny to have that mindset, but just that stuck mindset of like not being okay with the modern quilting world and the way that quilting is being approached by some of the younger, newer generation of quilters and designers. And
I appreciate that. It's very brave to do, and I think that that speaks to diversity and inclusion.
mhm,
Yeah, I do
yep,
a lot of training on that, and I told you that I work with guilds,
mhm,
and what you've just brought up happens often in guilds
mhm,
where when there are older generations and there's not all, so this is not a blanket statement,
no,
but many that I've been working with and some stories that, end up coming to me and conflict is the quilt police. It
mhm,
should be done this way. This modern stuff is just stupid.
yeah,
All of these types of things. And it's unnecessary
mhm,
and it is not inclusive.
no,
It is not diverse. And so
no, it's
I very
discouraging.
it's very discouraging and it's not okay.
No,
It's not okay. As humans, if we're human, like literally human, and we're not there to cause harm, you
mhm,
should be included. Whatever
yeah,
whatever
yeah,
organization or whatever, you should be included.
mhm,
And this is a beautiful craft.
mhm,
There's no need, in my opinion, of that nonsense to occur where there's clicks and there's making people feel bad, and
mhm,
I've heard stories of people not coming back to guilds,
mhm,
or even on social media you see the fusses that happen. So
mhm,
part of my passion with my other business, and I'm so glad, that you asked me to be on this podcast because people need to come together. We all have stories, we all have gifts, we all have talents. And
mhm,
when we take the time to spend time with one another, we can appreciate those things, those gifts and
yep,
talents with one another. And I think that the more of us that bring that to light and show how it can be done. That's part of, what I do when I go in and work with guilds is show how that can be done and be a good example ourselves.
yeah,
We can change and overcome those strongly entrenched biases that are unfortunately out there as imperfect humans.
yeah, yeah, and that honestly is where my heart is coming from in all this, and I'm grateful to people like you who come into guilds and help with that because it is like I've even on this show talking to so many people in my same boat of like I'm tired of being treated like I'm an idiot for wanting to do things this way.
Mhm.
And again, just like you said, it's not a blanket statement because there's
Right.
plenty of
Yep.
people out there who are open and
Yes.
willing to welcome whoever wants to quilt into
Hmm.
the community. And but I think there's been so much that just like with anything in any organization, with the Me Too movement and just like all these big things that started coming to light and people started saying, "I'm done allowing this to happen." I think we have to do it for quilting as well because if we're going to treat people like they're less than because they are different than us, we are no better than anybody else. We are no better. We're not being loving, we're not being kind, we're not being open And that has to stop.
Well, and it's called, it's junk theory of superiority. So all
Hmm.
these reasons why people might think they're better than others. And when you get to the root of it, oftentimes it's because people have a fear of change.
Hmm.
And change can be fabulous. And most of the experiences in my life, change is usually a good thing. And
Hmm.
what will happen if you look at the looking ahead, which I'm sure you've done, is
Hmm.
if people are not included, made to feel included, there's a difference between telling someone they're included
Yeah.
and truly knowing and feeling that they are. This legacy
Hmm.
of quilting will dissipate
Hmm.
because newer generations will be like, I'm having no part of this nonsense, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
We're going to form our own thing. And so,
Hmm.
um, I think that there's value in knowing maybe some of the exact precise things of how it was done back then. Like you can build upon that, you can alter and change. So I
Absolutely.
think we need both. We need all the generations because there's something beautiful in each of them
Hmm.
that we can learn from one another. And
Yeah.
I don't want this to go away.
No.
We want our kids to grow up to be able to join a guild or join an online quilting community and
Hmm.
feel included. And I
Yeah.
talk a lot about, I do a lecture at national shows called Building Healthy Quilt Guild. It's a 1 hour
Mm.
lecture, and I do it virtually too. And there are 4 tenets with basically what's called psychological safety in a guild or in any organization.
Yeah.
And one is that it is safe to be included.
Hmm.
2, it's safe to learn. So you're not going to be judged, ostracized, made fun of, any of that. You can ask questions and not be made to feel stupid.
Hmm.
Number 3 is safe to contribute. So you have ideas, things you want to show others, help others with, rather than just being the learner, right?
Hmm.
And then lastly is challenger safety. And that is when you have so much safety in your guilds, your business organization, even in your family, that you can challenge the status quo in a palatable, professional way to create innovation.
Yeah.
So that's pushing back sometimes with, we've only done it this way. What do you think about we support these other philanthropies, or we try making this class for children, or
Hmm.
we make this block a different way? I want to challenge and push back on that. And because typically when you challenge and push back in these settings, there can be backlash,
Hmm.
right?
Yep.
People bristle, people start talking about you, there's slander,
Hmm.
you don't feel comfortable anymore. But true challenger safety is when you can openly listen to someone's ideas and be open to those possibilities,
Yeah.
possibly use them, or if you decide you don't want to, you can kind of explain why this might not work, but in a loving, kind way.
Right.
And then nobody's got their, as we say in Arkansas, no one has their britches in a knot, you know,
Yeah.
because you've brought up this new way of doing it. So those are the 4 tenets of what any business, any family, any guild needs. And so I do a lot of that in my other business, but I brought it over into the quiltiverse
Yeah.
because I saw, no, no, this is too fun and beautiful of a hobby. And, how can I help and make a
Yeah.
difference so we can get away from some of that?
Yeah. Oh, I love that so much because that is, it is my pillar,
Mhm.
to create a space where people can feel like they're heard and like they're understood, and
Mhm.
that maybe if we don't have the same views, but they're still safe to express it here and
Yeah,
with me and around me, because I don't ever want to make anybody feel like they're not worthy of being in my presence, if that makes sense. Like
yeah,
I
it
don't
does
want
make
I don't want anybody to feel like I think that way because I certainly do not. It's and
sure.
I think, growing up kind of in a religious, um, kind of with a religious background helped me see how ugly that can
Mhm.
be.
Mhm. Yeah,
But also
absolutely.
how beautiful it can be when you do it right. And so, That's definitely where some of that comes from too, and, I love that there's a lot of us out there who want to see quilting continue, and we want to find a way to harmoniously marry all the generations of learning and growing and tradition and
Mhm.
skills together so that we can keep it alive and do it in a way that brings us together instead of pushes us away from each other.
It's true. It's interesting you brought that up. I also very much appreciate scripture and try to apply those principles in my life. And regardless of what listeners' beliefs are with a higher power or religion or
Mhm.
what have you, those principles, those scriptural principles always work when it comes to being kind and loving and
Mhm.
inclusive and non judgmental, all of those things. I've
Yep.
never seen them not work when we apply them. So, whether people naturally just not for scriptural reasons or religious reasons do those things, or it is because of those, they work, right? Regardless
Mhm.
of your beliefs,
Right.
those values really, really work. And they make the world a better place when we all try. We're not perfect,
No.
but when we really try to show those qualities and characteristics in the world, it's there's
Right.
just more harmony. We've got enough problems in the world if you look
Yeah.
at on the news. We don't need it in the quilty world,
No.
right? We don't.
No. It's supposed to be, like you
Mhm,
said, a therapeutic space. It's supposed to be a space where we can make something with our hands and contribute to the beauty of the world
mhm.
and what's here. And yeah, I am a big supporter of people making what makes them happy and brings them joy and for the sake of social media, if it's draining you, don't do it, for the sake of a business. If it's draining you, find a different way to do the thing or do
Mhm.
something different. And I think that openness is really where, as humans, we can falter because we do give in to our fears. And I think a
Yeah,
lot of the judgmental and the, controlling kind of behaviors that come about in groups and organizations, it's fear. It's fear
it's
based.
fear-based. It is
And
fear-based. Yeah,
so
it
unless
is.
you're willing to address your own fears and understand where they're coming
Mhm.
from and why they come up the way that they do, like those kinds of things are going to just continue. And so I think addressing people's mental health is where a lot of that has to, is going to change but people have to be again open and willing to face themselves and that's hard.
It is, and I have found in I do a lot of professional development too with leaders and CEOs
Mhm.
and boards of directors, and I have found over the years, and it applies in the quilty world, there are two things that are needed to be able to do what you just said. One is self-awareness. We have
Mhm.
to be self-aware, which means slowing down and being still sometimes to pay attention to why do I do this? Where is this feeling coming from? Where is this behavior coming from in myself? I
Mhm.
can tell you a lot of times because I used to be a social worker and my degree, my background is in psychology. A lot of
Okay.
it comes from childhood.
Yep.
There childhood issues, whether good, bad, abuse, trauma, all of that, it usually circles back to that and it's unresolved. There's
Yep.
unresolved trauma or issues. But the other thing that's needed is a quality
Mhm.
that if we don't have, we won't change, and that's humility.
Mhm.
If we have humility, then we can make adjustments and changes where we might see that we need to do that if we have a problem with a competitive spirit or being judgmental or discriminatory or
Mhm.
whatever it is.
Yeah.
Then we can kind of realize, you know what? Where's this coming from? Kind of
Yeah.
dig down with that, whether therapy's involved or you read self-help books or you
Mhm.
talk through it with a good friend.
Mhm.
And then the humbleness helps us to adjust accordingly, right?
Yeah.
And make those changes.
Yeah, and that piece is so big, and I think there's a weird push out there for being almost cocky about your insecurities or cocky about your behavioral issues, and it's kinda like, "Ha ha, this is so funny that I do this." It's like, but it's not. And I think maybe I just am
Well, the
picking.
question is, Does it cause harm to
Right.
someone else? And does it cause harm to you?
Right. And I
Those
think
would be the
some
questions to ask ourselves.
yeah, exactly. And I think sometimes that lack of self-awareness doesn't allow or like that's what causes people to not be able to see how their behavior is harming others or even harming themselves because they can't see it. And again, that openness, that
Mm,
piece of and humility is openness too, because you have to be open to like your side of the street. Is your side of the street clean? Probably not. And so look at what you need to do to pick up the pieces and own own your behavior, own your choices. And if you're honest with people and they don't handle it well or they don't want to deal with you anymore, like you have to just be okay with that. But I
yeah.
think the unapologetic of like, well, this is just the way I am is how we've ended up where we're at. And it can't
Hmm.
continue
Yeah.
clearly because
Well, and here's the thing. I I subscribe a lot to I'm trained in I don't know if you're familiar with Brene Brown, but she
oh, I
has
love
something,
her.
yeah, amazing
Love her.
evidence-based research. And so I'm trained in her Dare to Lead curriculum. And one of
Mm,
the things that Brene talks about is vulnerability,
mhm.
but also boundaries. So,
Yep.
if we give the most generous interpretation to what someone does or says. So oftentimes, if someone is what I think is out of line
Mhm.
or hateful, or you've got bullies, or you've got people that are, not nice on your Instagram posts and all of that, or whatever,
Yeah.
I ask myself, I wonder what happened to them that's
Mhm.
causing them to act this way, right?
Mhm.
There's always a reason why, and we may not know.
Yeah.
Maybe they're just having a bad day. And
Right.
then sometimes with people, and I know your listeners can't see this, some
Mhm.
people we get to love from here,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Some people we love from here. And then some people we have to love out here,
Yeah.
right? Because there has to be a level of boundaries on
Yeah.
abusive behavior that we will tolerate and what we will not tolerate.
Yeah.
And only each of us can know where those limits are.
Yeah. And I do love, yes, I love Brene Brown. She's like what brought me out of my self-sabotaging
Oh,
behaviors.
good,
When I was
good,
30, I found her and it
good.
changed my life. And so,
Amazing, amazing
yeah,
research. Yeah.
yeah, she's wonderful. And I also follow Dr. Nicole LaPera. She's on socials as the holistic psychologist. And
Hmm.
um I the thing with boundaries there, I was like, I almost lost my train of thought for a second. But the thing with boundaries is I think a lot of times it's put out there as a way to push people away and that don't accept our own behavior. But what Dr. Nicole said recently in a post was, and I just love the way she worded it, but boundaries are not about other people's behavior. It's about your own behavior and what you will
Yes,
and won't accept
that
and
is right.
how you want to behave. So if you're setting a boundary and someone's not following it, it is up to you
Hmm.
to walk away from it or to try to enforce that boundary with words or to make a decision. Can I have this person in my life?
Hmm.
Period.
Yeah.
And I think, with your demonstration of like they're either in your face, they're at a little bit of a space away because you need a little more space from them, or
Hmm.
they're real far away because you have to love them at a distance.
Right.
And
And still be kind, right? We
yeah,
still we still have to be kind and a role model, but we can still set those boundaries. I mean,
right.
I'll give you an example of one. I have a no tolerance bullying policy for my social media.
Hmm.
So if anyone ever posts on any of my social media platform anything hateful,
Yeah.
I actually do not waste my energy replying. I delete it and move on.
Yeah.
It's one and done. If
Hmm.
you're hateful and a bully, I'm not going to allow it, but I don't give myself time and energy to reply and get into this huge argument or whatever if it's
Right.
it's just blatantly hateful. And that's a boundary that I have, and
Yeah.
I'm not going to change it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I think there's a difference, and you have to decide it for yourself too. And I
you
think it
do.
can apply for anywhere you're at, but you have to decide like like you decided there's no tolerance. I'm not even going to entertain it. I'm not going to think about it. If it looks gross, I'm getting rid of it.
Yeah.
And I think that's great because I think the more energy we give to bullies, or if we keep feeling like we have to give them an explanation,
Hmm.
don't waste your time. They're not here to hear your explanation. They're here because they're hurting in some
Right.
way and they're looking for a way to express that, but they don't know how in a loving or safe manner. And so,
Well, and here's the thing. Hurt people hurt people.
yep.
And so if we remember this person is probably hurting,
Mm,
I can't be their therapist and help them through that.
yeah.
So I'm going to have to set this boundary
Yep.
and just be able to just move on that
Yeah.
this is a hurt person, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it can be tricky too, the boundary thing in the sense that like if we want to be helpful, like, and I think that kind of religious upbringing kind of teaches you like you need to be and of course this is my personal interpretation, so don't come at me people, but I just from my perspective felt like you were expected to be a doormat for other people while trying to like put a stamp of like I'm doing this because I am being loving, but and being taught that like self-love and setting boundaries and doing things for yourself was selfish and awful and that's the wrong way
Hmm.
to go about life. And so like unlearning all of that has been such a challenge
Hmm. I bet.
because I think we can easily convince ourselves that we're letting people walk all over us because we love them, or we're letting,
Hmm.
an organization take advantage of us because I'm here to help. I'm a team player. It's like, yeah, but what team are you on that you're the scapegoat for everything? What team do you want to be on, a team that uses you and then leaves you in the dust? And,
Hmm.
it's the same for guilds. It's like they expect all these volunteers, but then, you know, what do those volunteers get but overworked and nothing from it? It's kind of like,
Hmm.
and then guilds complain like, "Oh, people don't show up. We have so many open spots." And it's like, because then you've got members doing email blasts to people telling them, trying to belittle them and guilt them into helping. And so people walk away. You've got people who, are walking around shaming everybody or yelling at people or, you know, resistant to change. So they don't like the way things are going for this event this time and causing
Hmm.
problems for other people. It's like when that's all people are seeing, of course they're not going to want to jump in
No.
and help. And like,
Well, and I'll be honest, Amanda, when I go in and work with a guild, as you've
mhm,
described, there are many that fall in that category, unfortunately, or they
mhm,
have in cycles. I go in and do a whole full day training on what's called that psychological safety, and we
mhm,
have hard conversations about those behaviors. And then
mhm.
you have to look at what's our code of ethics,
Right.
what are our values as an organization, and tenets that we're going to live by in our
Mm,
organization. And then as a group you have to hold one another accountable. If someone starts being toxic, then how is the board address that?
yeah.
What's the process? What's the written protocols? If it's not written, there
Mhm.
is so much confusion. As Brene Brown says, what's clear is kind,
Yep.
and what's unclear is unkind. So
Yep.
the more things that are written with processes and not to be controlling. These are actually a protection so that
Mhm.
everyone knows how we're supposed to function together for a smooth running organization, right?
Yeah.
And so it's needed. That unity,
Mhm.
that unity is really really needed that you described so that so it's needed so what you described doesn't happen as
Right.
often.
Yeah. And so I just am curious, like, because a lot of guilds are held in churches. Um, and so do you see a difference in like the boards of guilds if they're whether they're held in a church or not held in a church, or is it kind of across the board they have
You
kind
would
of similar issues or
similar issues.
okay.
Similar. It doesn't
Yeah.
it's interesting too because you would think that some of those tenets that are taught in many churches would be practiced, but
Mhm.
we're human. People are human. And
Yeah.
if there's unresolved issues that
Mhm.
they have personally,
Mhm.
they're going to come out.
Yeah, for
They're going to
sure.
come out. Or, if they're not practicing, what you preach or how you should live your life and treat
Yeah.
others, it's going to happen. So, I mean, it
Mhm.
happens in all the profit corporations, guilds, child abuse organizations. I see it across the board. It's
Mhm.
all about the culture that a team creates, that an
Mhm.
organization creates, and what they allow
Mhm.
and what they role model. So, what people see us role model for good or bad,
Yeah.
then they can pick up on that and think, oh, it's tolerated. That's okay.
Right. Yeah.
So it takes courage to stand up as leaders
Mhm.
and when I say a leader doesn't mean necessarily a title of supervisor, manager, board president. A
Yeah.
leader means someone who influences. So we're
Mhm.
all leaders in that sense.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
what example are we putting out there with how we lead? And sometimes we're going to make mistakes. So that also means saying, I'm sorry. You know
Mhm.
what? I spoke out of turn, or I'm a little hormonal today, or whatever it is. I should not have said that. Let me circle back and apologize and make
Yeah.
amends for that. That's going to happen. That needs to happen too, as imperfect people.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you're right, it has to come from the top down, and if the board or you know, the the titled leadership team isn't practicing those things, or they don't know how to have boundaries for themselves either, and they're not holding their people accountable, it can run rampant, and or
Mm,
bad behavior can run rampant, and right, like an organization's only going to be as good as like the worst behavior that's held accountable, if that
that's
makes any
right.
sense. Like,
It does. It makes perfect sense.
okay, good. I was like,
Perfect
does this
sense.
sound crazy? But no,
No.
and having experience just working in all different kind of
Mhm.
places and spaces with different teams and groups and how different things run, it's like when it's bad, it's so bad.
Well, and I think here's the thing as humans, we forget.
Mhm.
We don't have to agree with everything people say or their preferences or,
Mhm.
their religion or color of their skin or whatever it is. You don't have to agree with the way someone does something. It's
Mhm.
okay to agree to disagree. That
Mhm.
that's not for you, whatever it is, that
Mhm.
in improv quilting or your political affiliation, that shouldn't matter. It's like, what do we have in common?
Yeah.
What do we have in common? We are quilters. We love fabric. We love notions. We love making quilts and giving them to people or donating them or whatever. It's like those other things really, we can agree to disagree. They may
Right.
not be choices I would make, or I wouldn't belong to, whatever group or organization or, religion or whatever. That's okay.
Yeah.
But not judging people and faulting them and criticizing and then being hateful about it.
Right. Yeah. It's like we're all creators of our own life experience too. So it's like
Hmm.
if you keep finding yourself in a situation where the people around you are a certain way, then it's like, well, what do you what are you doing that keeps ending you up in those situations? It's like
Yeah.
that self-awareness again comes into play, where
Mhm.
the more self-aware we all are, the easier it is to find other self-aware people
Mhm.
and make connections with people that you have true things in common with, and not just like I don't remember what they call it, but when you're only uniting on your common hatreds, like the
Mhm.
things you hate, like you're coming together on things that you love or that you want to support, or even if you don't
Mhm.
have all the same things in common, but you kind of, you can feel supported by that person and you can support that person and you don't feel like what they're doing is causing harm.
Mhm.
Like there's a common ground for that too. And so I think like setting your judgment aside and being able to just be with people and not project your own life experience on them, it's a hard task, but when you
Mhm.
can, that's where like the most beautiful connections are born.
It is, and it can take a lot of work. I mean,
Mhm.
I have to check myself all the time sometimes on things.
Yeah.
Sometimes things from our past will kind of creep in, and you have to kind of go
Mhm.
back, circle back, and work on yourself. And another piece that I talk about a lot, and again, it comes from Brené's research, is we all tell ourselves stories.
Yep.
And 95% of the time, the story is not correct, or parts of it are not, right? So,
Mhm.
what story are we telling ourselves about whatever scenario we're in the quilty world, or at the guild, or just life in
Yeah.
general? Is this factual? Do I have
Mhm.
all the facts? Is this really what's going on? Because we can't read people's minds.
Right.
We can make assumptions,
Mhm.
and those stories get us in trouble. So doing a check-in with,
Mhm.
if we're thinking, if I'm thinking maybe Amanda is upset with me because of A, B, or C, just
Yeah.
check in.
Yeah.
Amanda, have I said something? Or, is there something I've done that, it may be my imagination, but I want to check in and make sure that we're okay. And then that's where you get to say, you know what, Belle? I actually am a little upset because you said this, or you whatever it may be, or you made, I felt this way because of this comment. And then I can circle back and we can have a conversation about it. But I
Right.
think it's hard for people to go to the person that
Mhm.
you may have the challenge with because of that fear
Mhm.
of, maybe you've had a bad experience in the past going up to
Mhm.
someone. But to be able to have those conversations and make peace sure
Yeah.
makes things much better for our health and for the communities.
Yeah. And it's being willing to hear that maybe you've done something
Yeah.
to hurt
And
someone. Yep.
humility again.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And and I think the more we can practice that, the easier it gets, but it's still, it's important. And I think it's an important piece of keeping healthy, lasting relationships going, whether it's business
Mm-hmm.
related or just friendships in general, or your life partner or your kids. Like, just giving people the benefit of the doubt
Right.
and approaching them with love. Like, I love myself and I don't want to feel this way. So I'm going to ask this person that I care about, this question that
Mm-hmm.
seems scary and hard, but I need to know the answer.
Yeah.
And, you know, the times when I've had to practice that, I've, come out on the other side. I'm fine. Everything's fine,
All good.
but
Yeah.
it's information. It's all just information and more details that you can add to your story that either if you take the time to do some fact finding and figure it out, then great. You can add to your story and tweak it and change your life map a little bit so that it's a little clearer.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you keep hiding in the shadows, it can kind of get
Yeah.
dusty crusty. But anyway,
We're all imperfect. We all have stuff to work on, right?
yep,
It's
yep,
work in progress.
yep, absolutely. Well, I'm glad you're out there helping guilds and I'm glad you're out there designing beautiful patterns and creating cool notions for people and just
Oh.
sharing your love of quilting with the quiltiverse and being a voice out there for those of us who really want to see growth and equality and just more love in the quilting world.
Mm-hmm.
So thank
It's
you.
true. Oh, I'm happy to be here. I love people in general, and this community, the quilting community overall, is a
Yeah.
wonderful place to be. For the most part, I have great experiences, and
Yep.
I love to talk, about these things. So I appreciate you inviting me. And if, people want to get in touch
Mm.
with me, you can find me on my website, which is www.seamsewme.com. So that's a play on words. It's
Mm.
seams, SEWME. And I'm very active on Instagram as far as, reels and posts and, all of that kind of stuff. So that is at seams underscore sew underscore me. And then also YouTube. So I do a lot of tutorials because I'm a visual learner.
Mhm.
So I have tutorials, and then all of my patterns include a visual tutorial link within the pattern. So those are the
Oh,
ways that you can find me if people want to get
perfect.
in touch.
Awesome. Well, I will put links to all those places in the show notes below so people can get to you really easily. And otherwise, thank you again so much for joining me today. And I'm really looking forward to continuing to follow your journey and hearing more of what you have to share with the quilty world.
Oh, well, thanks for having me, Amanda. And
Of
I
course.
continue to wish you all the best with your podcast, and we'll continue to listen.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye bye.